So as you just saw, the build went pretty well. There's a couple of things in the previous video that I would like to talk about, plus some things about this case overall that I want to get to here. As you can see, I've got it lined up pretty nicely, actually. A couple of things I do need to kind of tweak inside of this case before I'll feel 100% confident in it and what I've done with it, but I'm impressed. And I can see why people, when they go and buy a tempered glass case, are pretty reluctant to go back to anything else. Now, there were some minor hiccups. If you watch the time lapse, you may have picked up on those, but I think the video went fast enough to where you really didn't see the real troubles that I ran into. So I'm going to lay them out pretty clearly, at least as much as I can. Building in this thing is actually pretty nice. Now, the layout is good. Their space is good. As you can see on the side, right in here, there is plenty of space for a radiator, a pump, and so on. Now, I do not have any room in the basement because I have 2 hard drive disks in there. And that was the first hiccup I ran into. Mike is in the camera shot. Whoops. So the first hiccup I ran into in this build was actually with the fans. So I decided to go ahead and put my Noctuas in, and the reason I went ahead and did that is because my Noctuas are PWM. I have full control over them. I can do pretty much anything with the speed and keep things under control. Plus, they're really nice and quiet. They don't make a whole lot of noise. In fact, this system overall is very quiet. So the first thing I wanted to do was get the Noctuas in. That was part of the prep work. To mount 3 120mm fans in this case does require a little bit of work. The first 2 are fine. It's the third one that is down below that becomes a little tricky. The hard drive cage that's down there for the mechanical drives, or for additional SSDs if you want, have to be removed unless you have a really, really good screwdriver that you can kind of get in between the little grooves on the side. I did not have that, so I had to remove that cage, and removing that cage was troublesome, to say the least. There's 2 little brackets. So what it is there's 2 brackets that are screwed in, one here, one here. This one wasn't too bad. This one, though, got stuck, and I had to kind of force it out. Getting it back in, though, turned out to be even bigger of a pain, and that is actually where I ran into the problem. Once I got them removed and I got the cables lined up and everything, really wasn't all that difficult to get the fans finished up. It was putting that last bracket, this bracket on this side, back in that turned out to be the biggest difficulty in that stage. Once that was all said and done, though, it was fairly smooth sailing. There were a couple of minor things that I ran into. Obviously, right, I don't know if you can see that. Right here, that is one of the cables. So I do need to do something about that because that is bugging the heck out of me. So that little piece that's sticking up right there is kind of bothering me. A little bit of the LED strip up there is showing, and over here I could probably clean that up a little bit better. I could probably clean up the drive cage a little bit better overall, but I don't think it's all that bad. Really, it's pretty easy. This case is open, it's spacious, there's plenty of places to route the cables. If you've seen any of the back side of this case, you can probably see a little bit of it in the beginning and a little bit of it in the previous video. Cable management is really easy, especially when you have custom sleeve cables. Now, these cables are, as I've briefly talked about, and I did a video on them, they are from CableMod. And I actually, if there's any kind of demand for it, could possibly, and you know, I can show you the process to do that. Now, I was fortunate with this set. I was able to get in touch with someone at CableMod, and they kind of hooked me up a little bit with a bit of a deal. I got a 20% off code because I have an ASUS, however you want to describe. I still cannot pronounce them. I've heard ASUS, I've heard ASUS, I've heard any number of combinations, but I'm going to say ASUS. No, I'm going to say ASUS. I'm sticking with it. I have an ASUS X99 A-II motherboard, which qualifies for a coupon. The coupon page, though, wasn't working very well. And when I told the guy at CableMod that, he basically said, here you go, here's a coupon. Got 20% off that order. The hang up is that they are overseas, so shipping to the United States is a $20 flat fee. So there is that to take into consideration. Now, this was a cable set that was made in their cable configurator, which basically allows you to set up which cables, color, and all sorts of stuff that you want for your kit. So I went ahead and did a pretty specialized kit. I have my PCIe, my 6+2. I have my motherboard, my 24-pin. I have 2 CPU cables in there because of this needing the additional CPU for overclocking. And then I have two single SATA and 1 quad SATA, and that actually worked out perfectly. I was able to connect everything the way I wanted. The only thing I didn't get to do that I wanted to do is I did not get to put the SSD in the front. I didn't really want to spend a ton of time trying to figure out how to route the SATA cables to that part, but in the end, it looks okay with them in the back. It's a little weird looking at this here, but it's with where the mounting point is, but it's not a big deal and not something that I really think is worth worrying about. Overall, though, any hiccups that I encountered in the build were actually of my own doing. There was a hiccup with the radiator, but it was my own fault. What was happening was one of the cables coming off the Kraken was actually caught behind the mounting tray, which wasn't letting me push it in all the way. As soon as I removed that cable, it went all the way into place. There's no interference with any cables or any pieces of the motherboard. It's sitting, there's a little bit of a gap actually in between everything. So this mounting tray is a great thing. And this is a 280 millimeter radiator. And you could easily, with a little bit of work, fit a 360 up here, I would imagine. I didn't want to do it in the front because doing it in the front either requires me to do some modding to this case or remove the hard drive cage, and I didn't want to do that. So being able to mount that in the top in a push configuration was exactly what I wanted to do in the first place. I was able to do it. I think it looks pretty good, and look at the inside of this case. This is one of the things I like the most about this case. These LEDs, they're actually being controlled by the front panel because I have not switched that off, but everything is actually routed to the motherboard. So if I wanted to, I could coordinate these colors using the ASUS AuraSync software. However, AuraSync software is a little bit buggy still, so I don't like leaving it open. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's actually why I'm looking at my cam software, why my temperature is approaching 40 degrees Celsius at 12% load. There's nothing going on this computer right now, but it's still ramping up, and I'm pretty sure that's AuraSync doing all of that. And that is unfortunate because when it works right, it does a decent job of controlling things. The X99 A-II lights are not the most robust. There's a couple on the PCI slots. There's one behind the graphics card, and there's another one on the soundboard that doesn't really show up all that well. But the really great thing about this case with the lighting, right now it's kind of going through like a blue to a purple to a white kind of thing. I think it goes purple, blue, white, and then cycles back through. This case inside with the tempered glass looks phenomenal. I get why people like these cases with LED strips. This, I think, looks really good. The only thing I might actually add, now that I've seen that they've announced it, Phanteks has these RGB brackets that you can connect. And if I can route it to the end of this LED strip, I can sync all this up, and I would have a little bit of illumination coming on the back side of this case, which is really the only thing that's missing. There's plenty of illumination here. There's a good amount of illumination there, but there's nothing on this back end. And I think being able to get one of those little RGB fan shrouds that they're selling now would help make this look a little bit better. Outside of a minor issue installing my power supply, which was again user error, there were really no hiccups that I could think of. Once I got the hang of managing the cables in the back, that was a breeze. Only having the cables I needed made things much simpler. Everything was pretty straightforward to connect. There's only two front panel connectors on this case, the power switch and the hard drive light. That's it. There's no reset. There's nothing else. There's only a USB 3.0 because there's no 2.0. There's no USB 2.0 on the front of this case. It's only a pair of 3.0s. There's the HD audio. So I actually have an open USB 2.0 if I ever want to add anything that's powered by that. Pretty much it was just a matter of plugging everything back in. Now I was able to do this without unplugging the SATA cables from the SATA ports on the side of the motherboard, which made reconnecting all the hard drives easier. But everything seems to be running pretty well, and initial impressions are very solid. Now, so a couple of things I've noticed right away. At idle, this case is virtually silent. The only thing I can hear a little bit are these front fans, and that's just because I have them going at a fairly high speed to keep positive air pressure. I don't really hear the rear fan. I don't really hear the Kraken fans, but at load it is a little bit louder. It does kind of sound a bit louder than the H440 did at load, and that could just be because of the H440's sound dampening. It's not really something that I would say is too troublesome. I haven't played any games yet since I've rebuilt this system, but I do know that rendering in Adobe Premiere Pro does seem to kind of get this system going pretty good, and it is a little bit loud. That could be the rear fan that's making more noise than anything. I don't really know for certain. I know these guys do ramp up pretty good, but they didn't seem to be that loud in the H440, so it could just be that rear exhaust that I'm hearing really take off, which could be remedied with a new fan. I don't know if I want to go that route yet. I don't think it's really worth it. I'm going to have to see how it sounds when gaming. That's going to be the real indicator. But at idle, when this thing is only at like 2 or 3% idle, this case was 3 to 4 degrees cooler than the H440, and that was pretty significant. And even at load, I have not seen it go above 61 degrees Celsius, at least on a short-term basis. So the cooling actually seems to be better in this case. There's a pretty expansive amount of grill openings in the back, behind, right in front of the graphics card and below the fans. So there's a lot of ventilation in the back. So that could be a reason why it's running a little bit cooler. It could just be there's no obstructions here. There's no drive cage, so the air is just going straight across the graphics card to the CPU area. So maybe that's helping. I'm not an expert on this sort of thing. Somebody watching this might be able to explain this to me a little bit better. So the initial impressions there are very solid, and again, it just looks great. The glass just, I can't say enough about the glass. But if I were to build a system from scratch in this, it would be a breeze, because there's just so much room to work with. It's so much easier to route the cabling through here, and again, because there's a little bit more space between the motherboard tray and the glass panel, cable management was a lot easier, and the fact that I limited how many cables. I wasn't using a bunch of, quad SATA. I didn't have the extra long, thicker cables going in. I'm not using a Molex. There's no Molex in this case whatsoever. But I really just can't say enough. I can't. So initial impressions of this case are very strong. I'm going to see how it performs long term. There's been people who've raised concerns about the ventilation up top. It seems to be fine. When this thing is going, I can feel the air really pushing out, and there is ventilation in the back part of this panel. You can't see it from here, but right underneath the top of this panel, there is a pretty decent amount of ventilation. So there are places for the air to escape. So this isn't really an in-depth review of this case, because I don't do that. I'm not an expert. There's a million people who've done reviews of this case who can tell you the pros and cons, but I can definitely agree with one thing that they've all said. It is a beautiful looking case, and it was a breeze to work in, and it's pretty silent. Surprisingly silent. There's plenty of room in the future. I've talked about doing this. I intend on doing it at some point. There's an upgrade path still for this computer overall. One of the first things I'm probably going to do, if I don't get a better camera, because this one's not very good, is water cooling. But I'm kind of torn on whether to do that or not, because another upgrade path has me saving up for a 1080 Ti, getting a 1440p high refresh rate display, maybe even a 4K display for editing purposes, and then have the 1080 Ti drive that. And once I have that, do water cooling, cool the CPU, cool the graphics card, and put together as silent a build as possible. Through EK, I'm looking at about $600 to $700 to do that kind of a kit. But I do know Phanteks offers water cooling kits now. And there's also other companies, Alpha Cool, Primo Chill. There's a number of companies that sell water cooling supplies. So it's still something that I'm looking at doing, but I'm not really sure the order. Again, there's upgrades that I can do to this system down the road. X299 was just announced, so maybe other X99 series chips or CPUs will start to fall in price. Could open up a possibility there. Maybe the X99 boards will come down and I can get a better board, a better processor. That's not really something I'm too terribly concerned about. This 5820K performs pretty damn well, all things considered. Renders things out like a champ, handles games like I need it to. And even this 1070 does a nice job. The 1070 would allow 1440p, but if I'm going to go big, I might as well go real big. So there are upgrade paths available, but I've rambled on. We're getting awfully close to 20 minutes, and I didn't really want to make it that long. But if you're on the fence on this case, and maybe one of the reasons you're on the fence is because of the price, I don't blame you. You're not going to do much better in the $150 to $200 range than this. This thing is solid. Like, it's a metallic, although it will not hold a puck, so it's not like anything magnetized. So I found that out. The puck that NZXT sent me is worthless on this case. It will not stick to any part of it. But the LED strips are holding nicely inside of it. These are Phanteks LED strips. I've heard complaints about them as well. I'm fine with what they're doing right now is what I want them to do. It's accenting the case, providing enough light to supplement the rest of the case. Obviously, there are aspects of the motherboard that kind of throw the color off a little bit. The XMP light, the Q code being red. But outside of that, there's kind of a red and purple theme going on right now, and I think it looks pretty spectacular. There's going to be at least one more video, though, in this PC build, vlog, setup kind of thing, and that will take place after the rooms have switched around. As you saw in the opening, I did do some rearranging. We have cleaned up the area a little bit, but we are going to be moving everything around. This whole thing is going to be going into the small bedroom in the near future. And once that's done, that will probably be the definitive setup. I do need to get some longer HDMI and DisplayPort cables, though. That is one thing that is messing up the cable management in the back of this desk. I don't mind the cables being there, but I can't tuck them the way I want because some of the monitor cables are not long enough and they're kind of stretched, they're kind of sprawled out a little bit. But all in all, I think it looks pretty good over here. The microphone placement for my main microphone is still a little bit troublesome, but that's a problem for another day. I think that's going to about wrap it up. Phenomenal case, looks great, sounds pretty quiet, except that load gets a little bit loud. Plenty of space for future updates. The only other thing that I would say might be a concern in this kind of a case that I didn't have to deal with in the H440, this graphics card was actually kind of propped up by one of the drive cages, and it looks pretty level, but I do wonder if a beefier card would suffer from some GPU sag in here. But all in all, I can't complain. I think it looks great. I'm impressed with it. I think it was worth the money that was spent. I now have an H440 case that I don't know what I'm going to do with. I might hold on to it for a future possible build, might give it to somebody, might sell the dang thing. I've had enough problems with it. I'm about done with it. That's going to do it for this episode of the PC build vlog. As you can see, the masterpiece, as I would like to refer to it as, is pretty much complete. This is probably how it's going to be for a while. I really think the next thing I do is get a camera because I really need to improve the video quality. Be that as it may, I'm impressed. I like it. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions, if you have any comments, if you have anything you think I could do differently with this build, by all means, let me know. I am open to any and all ideas. Unless I can't absolutely afford them, you're just going to have to wait. So until next time, I will catch you guys later. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.